Hutch was a secret agent. Before each execution of a traitor, he could hear all kinds of confessions and pleas for mercy, but he always pulled the trigger without hesitation. But this time, the traitor's sincere repentance touched him, so Hutch let him go secretly. Later, the traitor really changed himself and had a happy family, and Hutch also wanted a peaceful life, so he chose to quit the secret agent organization. One night, his peaceful life was disrupted. Two masked thieves broke into his house. Hutch, who had noticed the intruders, quietly picked up a golf club to defend himself and then reached for the phone to call the police. Was spotted by the thieves in the next second. Hutch pointed to the plate beside him, which was specifically for keeping loose change, but the thief thought the money was not enough. So, the thief forcibly pulled off Hutch's gold watch and also set his eyes on Hutch's wedding ring. Just then, son, who had been awakened, suddenly rushed out of the bedroom and knocked down the other thief. At this moment, both thieves focused their attention on the son. Hutch took the opportunity to approach the thief from behind. As long as he knocked the thief unconscious, he could save his son. But suddenly, he hesitated. Not only did he fail to help his son, but he also ordered him to release the thief immediately. After breaking free, the thief angrily punched the son and then fled the scene with the stolen goods. The son was furious at Hutch's cowardly behavior. Looking at his disappointed wife, Hutch could only lower his head in silence. But the next day, the news that Hutch's house had been robbed spread throughout the town. Neighbors who had never been on good terms with him began to taunt him as soon as they met. After humiliating him, he even showed off his sports car. Not only that, when Hutch arrived at the company, his elder brother, who had always looked down upon him, pointed a pistol at his head. It turned out that he didn't believe that this coward, Hutch, could protect his sister, so he had bought him a pistol for self-defense. However, this insignificant figure in everyone's eyes turned out to be the most capable agent of the FBI. Because the secret missions he participated in left no survivors, he was given the internal code name Sanitation Worker. Hutch locked the door and turned on the special communication device disguised as a radio. Facing his former FBI colleagues' inquiries about last night's robbery, Hutch finally told the truth. It turned out that he found there were no bullets in the thief's pistol, and judging from the tense expressions of the two, they should just be two pitiful people who had no choice but to rob. So he chose the least costly way to handle it, even though he would be ridiculed by others. But after killing so many people, he just wanted to be an ordinary person now. But when he came to the nursing home after work to visit his father and told him about this matter, the old man's words made him fall into deep thought.
Guardi come eravamo, Hutch.
When he got home in the evening, his daughter told Hutch, with a sense of grievance, that the cat bracelet she had placed on the plate seemed to have been taken by the thief as well. He had intended to comfort her, but as soon as he thought of what his father had just said and the daily contempt and ridicule he endured, Hutch immediately turned and left home. He returned to the nursing home again. First, he put on a jacket that his father had worn when he was young. Then, he rummaged through the closet and found his father's long-expired identification and a handgun. After that, took a bus and, using the FBI ID as a cover, visited various tattoo parlors in the city, as the tattoo on the thief's wrist was his only clue. But when he showed his identification at the last store, an old man beside him burst into laughter. It turned out that he had immediately noticed that Hutch's police badge had long expired. The shop owner, who had been fooled, immediately showed his fist. Hutch had no choice but to take out a wad of money, attempting to solve the problem with money, but the already angry shop owner refused to accept it. While the two sides were negotiating, the old man accidentally saw the tattoo on Hutch's wrist. The next second, he involuntarily stood up and said something inexplicable. "Thank you for serving the country." Then he hurriedly left through the back door. The old man's strange behavior surprised and puzzled the boss. The man who had just wanted to fight lost his temper instantly.
Come posso aiutarti? Dimmi dove posso trovare questa persona.
Upon getting the address, Hutch immediately sneaked into the thief's home. He landed a punch right on the man's face and pointed a gun at his head. The woman immediately handed over the stolen watch out of fear, but the man claimed they had never seen any cat bracelet. Enraged, Hutch promptly threw him to the ground. Facing the two people who wouldn't tell the truth, Hutch directly pulled the trigger of his pistol. But just then, the cry of a baby suddenly came from the bedroom. Hutch opened the door, and only then did he notice a baby lying on the floor wearing an oxygen mask. The extremely angry Hutch softened instantly. He silently put away the gun in his hand and turned around without looking back. Although he had found the thief who had taken his daughter's bracelet, he had no way to deal with them. Hutch could only furiously punch the wall to vent his anger. On the way home, a speeding Hummer suddenly forced a bus to stop. Several drunk men got on the bus by force and started causing trouble. They not only deliberately provoked conflicts with male passengers inside, but also surrounded a girl and tried to molest her. But Hutch, sitting at the back of the car, wore a smile. Filled with rage, he had nowhere to vent it. These thugs who showed up in time were just like sandbags sent by God to him. He had to have a big fight here today. Hutch hung up the driver's phone just as he was about to call the police, then persuaded him to get out of the car. He slowly closed the door and pulled out his gun under the gaze of the thugs and emptied all the bullets. Hutch approached them menacingly, but as soon as he started fighting, he took a few punches. Fortunately, the pain instantly awakened his dormant muscle memory, and Hutch, now skilled in combat, quickly gained the upper hand. Seeing he couldn't win, the leader suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed Hutch in the left rib with all his strength. Though Hutch immediately struck back with a powerful punch, the intense pain quickly put him at a disadvantage, and he was thrown out of the car by several people. They thought it was over, but to their surprise, Hutch, who had been thrown out the window, got back up. He climbed back onto the front door of the bus, and the men who had been celebrating moments ago now looked terrified. Hutch told the girl to get off the bus quickly, then cut a piece of seatbelt and wrapped it around his fist. He was ready to fight back. At that moment, the man who had stabbed Hutch took the opportunity to pick up his handgun, but Hutch remained unfazed. He forcefully broke the bus's handrail to knock the man's gun out of his hand and launched a fierce attack, leaving him unable to get back up. Seeing the man struggling to breathe, Hutch even kindly inserted a makeshift tracheal tube before leaving. He only wanted to cripple these thugs, not take their lives. What Hutch didn't expect was that the man he had just crippled was the younger brother of Urian, the leader of a Russian gang. Seeing his brother unconscious from the beating, Urian angrily attacked the henchman responsible for protecting him. Fearing for their lives, the henchmen carefully retrieved Hutch's fallen subway card, which temporarily calmed Urian's anger. Yuri then immediately summoned a hacker to crack the card's information, only to discover that the card's owner was just an ordinary middle-aged man.
Non sei in grado di riconoscere un lupo che si maschera da agnello? Metto in serio dubbio la possibilità di farti lavorare qui.
Under Yuri's threat, the hacker had no choice but to send an email to his colleague. However, when the colleague searched for Hutch's name as requested, the system directly denied access. The man had no choice but to break into the confidential room and finally found Hutch's file among a pile of top-secret documents. But most of the information had already been erased, so the man could only send over photos of Hutch from his previous missions. Upon seeing the photos, the hacker was deeply shocked and immediately shut down the computer, packed his luggage, and prepared to flee.
Me ne vado, puoi non pagarmi. Buona fortuna.
Julian wasn't an ordinary person either. Seeing the scattered documents of Hutch on the ground, he immediately issued operational instructions to his subordinates. Meanwhile, Hutch, who was at work, suddenly received an anonymous text message. Following the message's instructions, he went to a barbershop and indeed found his former colleague, who had become the director. He told Hutch he was in big trouble and then pulled out Urian's files. It turned out that Urian was not only extremely brutal, but also had antisocial personality disorder, serving as the guardian of billions of dollars in underground funds for the Russian mafia. That evening, Hutch, who hadn't cooked in a long time, prepared a special meal for his family, intending to send them abroad under the pretext of a vacation after they had eaten their fill. But before they could even start eating, a large group of assassins sent by Yuri had already arrived at the door. Hutch immediately took his wife and children to the basement, then opened the control panel hidden under the light switch. It turned out that he had already installed blast-proof doors in the basement. Hutch quickly pulled the circuit breaker, then engaged in a fight with the assassin. Hutch was knocked to the ground by the assassin, but he quickly got back up, grabbed a boiling kettle, and poured the hot water onto the assassin's face, swiftly turning the tables. The assassin took advantage of Hutch's distraction and knocked him unconscious from behind. Since Urian had ordered them to spare his life, the remaining three tied Hutch up, stuffed him into the trunk, and headed back to their base to report to Urian. Halfway there, the unconscious Hutch woke up prematurely. Realizing his hands were bound behind his back, Thor forcefully broke his thumb and successfully removed the handcuffs. He then retrieved the fire extinguisher from the trunk, picked open the back seat, and sprayed the killer with the extinguisher. The vehicle, with obstructed vision, lost control and crashed violently, killing the three assassins on the spot, while Thor, hidden in the trunk, survived. Thor immediately called his father to warn him to be on guard, then ran back home. The once clean and cozy house was now in ruins. Thor opened the blast-proof door to rescue his wife and children hiding in the basement, then loaded them into the car and instructed them to find a safe place to hide. Though she didn't know what had happened, years of trust led his wife to follow his instructions. Watching the car drive away, Saul realized he had to eliminate this major problem once and for all. He immediately retrieved the gold bricks hidden in the wall cavity and set fire to the house he had lived in for 20 years. He then smashed the glass of his neighbor's antique sports car with a punch, drove to his father-in-law's factory, and used all the gold to purchase the factory. Meanwhile, the assassin sent by Yuri had arrived at the nursing home where Hutch's father lived. They never expected the old man they intended to kidnap to be so formidable. The two had just aimed their guns at his head. Startled by the gunfire, the nurse rushed over, frantically opening the door, only to find it was the sound of the television.
Udev, abbassa quella merda, dai!
Meanwhile, Yuri also learned from the TV news that the operation had failed. Enraged, he immediately called all his men, but this was all within Hutch's expectations. He was certain Yuri would not give up so easily, so he immediately began setting traps inside the factory. The construction materials and simple tools scattered throughout the factory were quickly transformed into powerful weapons under Hutch's guidance. In half a day, the ordinary small factory was transformed into a super trap. Now the only thing left to do was to lure Yuri in here. Hutch quietly infiltrated the vault where they stored their illicit funds and swiftly neutralized all the gang members inside. He poured gasoline into the fire sprinkler system within the vault, ensuring it was evenly distributed throughout every corner of the space. He then ignited a stack of US dollars, reducing the Russian gang's decades of accumulated wealth to ashes in an instant. Later, Hutch went to Urian's bar and began to enjoy his meal in front of him. Urian immediately gathered a dozen henchmen to surround him, but Hutch remained calm. He slowly pulled the tablecloth off the table, revealing a landmine marked, "This side faces the enemy," in front of Urian. Reluctantly, Urian had to dismiss all his henchmen. Unexpectedly, Hutch then pulled out a stack of charred US dollars. Upon learning that the vault had been burned, Urian erupted in anger, exactly what Hutch had intended. After formally declaring war on Urian, Hutch left through the front door with the landmine and calmly sat in a sports car by the roadside to wait. Sure enough, Urian soon emerged with his men, and a fierce gunfight was about to unfold. But before he could enter the door, he was shot in the shoulder by Urian, who had caught up with him. He could only temporarily hide behind the car. At that moment, his younger brother, who was still serving in the FBI, appeared in time and quickly took out the enemy's machine gunner. When the enemy shifted their attack target, the father, who had been hiding behind the door, suddenly appeared and fired continuously at Urian. With the two of them working together, Hutch finally managed to enter the factory. Urian immediately led his men in pursuit, entering the door as soon as they arrived. As the remaining assassins approached the factory door, he immediately ignited the fuse on the mousetrap. As soon as the assassins opened the door, the bullets from the mousetrap fired swiftly. Hutch then immediately began his counterattack. He then took the directional bomb and rushed toward the warehouse. As soon as the pursuing assassins appeared, he immediately activated the modified shells. At the same time, the other two also eliminated the remaining enemies one after another. Thus, after many years, the three men who once struck fear into others once again found themselves on the same battlefield. But just then, Yuri, who had been knocked down, suddenly reappeared and struck his brother's arm. The three, who had just finished fighting, were nearly out of ammunition. At the critical moment, Hutch attached the last guided bomb to the nearby bulletproof glass, then charged toward Urian while holding the glass. Once within range, quickly pulled the bomb's fuse. Thus, the feared Russian gang was completely eradicated by the three men.